and start with an invocation. Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we continue this meeting. Allow us to engage in meaningful discussion, allow us to grow closer as a group, and nurture the bonds of employees in our community. Fill us with your grace, Lord God, as we make decisions that might affect the employees, staff, citizens, and business of our community. And continue to remind us that what we do here today, all that we accomplish is for the pursuit of truth and greater glory of you and the service of humanity. We ask these things in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have some distinguished guests. That's great. Appreciate y'all coming. And do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion.
And a second?
Yep, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any comments from the audience at this point? All right, moving right along to Darren's general manager report, please.
All right, what we've got for you today is a PowerPoint. We'll get it fired up. Well, everybody's seen the headline so far. What we're looking at is a rate increase. And unfortunately, there's no way to varnish it or make it any prettier than what it is. What we're going to be proposing is we have an anticipated 16% increase. We would need the increase to begin on October 1st, 2024. Currently, we have UFS, which is an outside consultant. They're helping us to look at this to make sure that we are right on target with this 16% and what they may ultimately come up with. And again, this is anticipated, and I'll show you why and how come that is that 16%. We are going to make sure with UFS that when it is applied, that it goes to the residential, the commercial, the industrial. Each one of them has the appropriate percentages, and it's put in the right place so that nobody is carrying the weight of the other. And so that's why we have the consultant with their assistance. What is it coming from? When we buy our electricity, there's three things that we pay. Number one, we pay an electricity charge. This is a picture of Prairie State. This is down in Marissa, Illinois. We get approximately 20 megawatts of power every single day from this coal-fired power plant. And that is also where we get other energy from, is that we're getting it from hydro, we're getting it from nuclear, we're getting it from natural gas generation, we're getting it from renewables every single day. And so we have to have the end user, but it's the amount of kilowatt hours from the generators that we have to pay for. So that is one portion of our bill that we pay every single week. That's the power that simply burns and turns your motors, lights your rooms, keeps your homes cool and or heated. The second portion of the bill that we pay is transmission. And we have to take in all of those generators, wherever they might be throughout the MISO footprint throughout the nation, we have to put it through power lines. And we take, and it costs us right around $2 million a year for our transmission. That varies up and down, and what happens is there's congestion. And so we actually go out and we have about 22 different lines that our consultants help us to have partial FTRs, financial transmission rights to those lines. They use them. If one becomes congested, we're able to go to the other and to the other and to the other. But that can range up or down. Sometimes those FTRs are positive, sometimes they're negative. But that's a cost that we have. It's becoming a constraint throughout the nation. This is a current short-term look at what's being proposed for transmission lines inside the MISO footprint. Good old Missouri, we're down here right smack dab in the middle. The nation recognizes that there is a shortage, that we're starting to constrain ourselves because of all of the different, particularly renewables that are being built. The future 1, 2, and 3, those are what's in the long term. And so long term being 5 years and more, But all of these are places where they recognize constraints and more needing to be done. The third part of our bill that we pay is called capacity. And capacity is what's catching us. Capacity is a measure of the amount of generation that's available throughout the entire MISO footprint versus the amount of demand. And for the last many years, we've always had more generation than we've had demand and need. The definition is electric capacity is the total amount of electricity generation available for consumption at any given time. And the any given time that they measure is the worst day of the year for every single community inside that footprint. So it looks at the hottest day when no sun is shining and the wind isn't blowing and when everybody has their air conditioning on and we actually have the greatest amount of demand versus the generation available. And what has happened in the last 2 years, that is for the first time in our history, flipped to where there is more demand than there is generation. Now what MISO does, they create a market right down here. The capacity market that they create is to incentivize electric generators to make enough power. And I believe what they've done in the past, at least with the electrification of America as it's gone forward, that has failed. Now, we are part of MISO, but there is a RTO, a transmission organization, over every single one of the states and the areas inside America. Over here is PJM, and if you can take and remember that guy, that stands for Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland. Those guys, we'll talk about them a little bit later on. Here we are, right inside Zone 5 of the MISO footprint. Now what happens is every April, May, they have an auction. And what MISO has done, they go through and they measure every one of the generators. They look at the demand, and then they take and they come up with a price for capacity. And what they're ultimately going to do is they're going to take the money that they collect from capacity and they're going to give it to generators so that they have more reason to build. And that's kind of upside down, if you ask me, but that's what they do. There is also a difference in how they measure accredited capacity. This is from MISO. It says fleet change. When we say fleet change, this means the mix of how much coal generation, how much hydro generation, how much nuclear generation, and how much natural gas and renewables, solar and wind. That change in mix is creating a gap between the region's levels of installed and accredited generation capacity. Installed capacity, the maximum amount of energy that resources could theoretically produce. What happens is if you put and build a 100-acre, 10-megawatt solar farm, well, on the hot day of the summer, it might produce almost that 10 megawatts. But they know in reality, they only give it 18% capacity because it's only an 18% of that is going to actually be available at the worst time when it's needed. And therefore, the accredited capacity has been brought down immensely because most of what's being built out there is coal is being retired. Both wind and solar is being built. Therefore, you're taking all the accredited capacity, removing it to a 18% of the nameplate. Historically, where we have cleared in pricing, Zone 5, right here, got to follow up and down. In 15-16, it was $3.48. In 16-17, it went up to $72. That cost us approximately $1.2 million for that 1 year. It then went down to $1.50, then $10, then $2.99, then $5, $5. And then in 23, 24, 22, 23, it went to $235. This year, it has gone to $719.81. And there's a couple of things that are very interesting about this. The MISO auction had gone from just 2 years ago, they went from what was an annual auction. So they were taking the worst day in summer, extrapolating that across all 365 days for one annual year. And they are saying that we now are going to do it on every single season. If you look at this, and they'll show it in another way, summer came in at $30. That was a very manageable number, not a big deal. Fall in Zone 5 came in at $719.81. Winter came in at 75 cents. And then brought to spring again, $718.81. Those numbers are what's going to cause us to have this rate increase. Zone 5 cleared at Cone, and the inadequate capacity sent this just through the roof. Why did it happen? Retirements and capacity issues of the transmission in and out. They also cut the ability of us to take power and credit, just the capacity, from Zone 4 into Zone 5.
Can you go back a slide?
What's that?
Can you go back a slide, please?
Sure.
Oh, one more, sorry. I just wanted to see the comparison from year to year. Like how much it changed from one year to the next. Basically, where I'm going with that is this $719, are we thinking it's going to be 2024, 2025 and continue to trend up? Or is there possible, that's what I want to look at.
That's a great question. And if you've got the right crystal ball, you're a billionaire. We'll get to it. So I'm going to talk about where we're headed. We're looking at, so one of the things we did we fall down on the job? We went out and we were looking for every bit of capacity in Zone 5. We went out for 3 different RFIs. There was none. We went into Zone 4, which is Illinois, and we have that good old Marissa, Illinois, that's our coal plant. They were, because this hit Cone, which means it hit the very maximum, they said you might not get credit for the Marissa, Illinois generation capacity. They have what's called an HUC. It's a historical usage consideration. We were given it. There were a couple of there was at least one other community in Missouri that did not get that HUC, and they were caught even worse than we are. So there's some arbitrary decisions going on here. And with that, we have some activity that we're doing that I'm not going to say at this time, that we're going to be pushing back on to see if we can get some of these things corrected moving forward. Now, what happens going forward? We're going to have to continue to search for every bit of capacity that's created in Zone 5. And we're going to have to watch about the other coal plants that are coming offline.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So that's what happened right here. Here's our costs, and we are the only ones that got hit. Other states, $15 and $34 for their capacity in those zones. The influence on us is, as usual, we usually pay about $19 million a year in electricity, about $2 million in transmission. This is driving it up to $4.9 million in capacity this year. Why? Right up here. Due to the higher demand, so we still have people wanting more and more, and the capacity import limit. They stopped allowing us to get credit for capacity coming in from Zone 4. We had actually hedged capacity out of Zone 4. We're going to try and get credit for that in Zone 4. We're going to sell it in Zone 4. It'll be a wash. But if we'd have had that credit in, it would have saved us another couple of million. Again, these are rules. The biggest one that hit is this retired coal plant. Rush Island was taken offline on October 15th. It was taken offline on October 15th because they were being sued by the Sierra Club. Had they taken offline on October 31st, all those credits would have been available to us. So there's legal actions, lawfare going on that's getting us the retirement of coal units and planned maintenance. The other thing that happens is that your natural gas generators and your coal generators, because your peaks are done in the summertime and the wintertime, what they do is they wait till the spring and the fall to do a planned maintenance. Usually it's about a month. We actually go out and we hedge because we know that Prairie State, they do their maintenance in the fall, and we take and hedge for that 1 month to protect ourselves because they're going to be out of generation. We're going to have to be entirely on the market. It's not a bad, we do just fine with it. The problem is they took another generating plant and they stretched it for the entire season of the spring. And with that, that dropped that capacity entirely out on that spring, that shoulder season, which again, they recognize it was the coal units that were being retired early and the planned maintenance that hit that drove that price up. Normally, we're about $60,000 to $300,000 cost annually for that capacity. This time, $4.9 million. Yeah.
Why did it hit spring and fall? Because they do their planned maintenance. You know, they don't do spring and fall though.
It was both. So what happens is this. So this is the second year that they've done the seasonal auction versus the annual auction. They call it the cost of new entry, that it hit this level, which then triggered both of them. I don't know any better than that. But we have a consultant. This is one of those things that we have questions on that we're pushing back through some other means that we're going to look for some remedy in the future. So one of the other problems with this is that for the last 2 years, we have rate covenants. When we have borrowed money for the project, we did our 161 line that we have, new line we put in. We have the Oakwood substation that we have rebuilt. Those covenants for that borrowing, they have a mechanism inside of it that says we have to maintain an income to debt ratio of 1.25. We have been below that now for well over a year because in 2023, we had capacity issues there, and we took from reserve $3.4 million to do that, to pay for that. With the board, you guys were generous and did that. It avoided a rate increase of that amount, but reserves are not income. And because it came from that reserve, it showed that we weren't making that ratio. We could handle that for a little bit. We reported it appropriately to our bond counsel, who reported it to those that hold the bonds. We would be in default for another year. Now there is a great concern. We need to get to that 1.25. We've told bond counsel we would. If things had stayed the same as last year, we would have made it. We'd have been all right. Paul, can you give us any color on what would happen if we don't maintain or meet these that bond ratio?
Yeah, so every year.
Paul, I'm going to ask you to step up to the microphone so we can record this.
When we have debt as a municipal, we have to file disclosures every year, annually, on that debt. Basically, a disclosure is an update on where you're at financially. They give some plans for the next coming year with capital, things like that. And so what they do with that, if you default on a covenant, you have to disclose that. And then along with that, you have to come back with a plan that gets you back into compliance. But theoretically, what could happen when you default is that the trustee could come and take the collateral, essentially, that you've put up with that debt. Obviously, that is very unlikely to happen. What's more likely to happen is that the trustee could force you to retain outside legal counsel that came in, sat down with you, went through everything, basically like an outside audit, to make sure that you have the right steps in place to get back into compliance. That's also, per bond counsel, very unlikely to happen. However, that likelihood does increase the more years in a row that you don't meet that covenant. So like Darren was saying, this year was the second year in a row that we haven't met it. With next year, the increase in capacity, we're looking at 3 years in a row potentially, unless we do this rate increase.
I would explain this. Go ahead.
Also to note, maybe you can shed some light on that too. The default in this bond also potentially affects the city overall's bond rating. Is that correct?
Well, yeah. Yeah, potentially if the city were to go out and get financing, we, being an enterprise fund of the city, would be included in that rating that they'd have to get from a rating agency. So in one way, since we roll up in those financials, they would look at us in that way. So yeah, it could be a detriment to the city as well.
Thanks.
So of this 16% rate increase, the 15, if you take that 16, only 15% of that will be exactly for purchase power. Our rate increase last year, it helped us to pay for additional costs and inflation, et cetera, in materials and assets. Only a small 1% of all that might be added to the maintenance of the electric department. In other words, we're not getting any increase in salary. We're not increasing any of the benefits to our employees. We're meeting the requirements of our union, and almost none of it is going to anything other than perhaps paying for additional costs that I'll show you here in just a few minutes. So all of this is due to, this 16% rate increase is due to purchase power. And it's a pass-through cost. So the very first question is, what the heck is the BPW doing? You guys need to tighten your belt, and you got to cut back, and you've got to, all you guys do is raise rates. And I'll tell you that I think we've got to be very careful in that I think we've been what I call running a tight ship. What that means is a good old English idiom that we are running a very strict and effective way. We're not running fat. We're running very slim, and we're running a tight ship. Our financials are in order. Our people are working hard. We're doing a great job. Here are some of the things that we've done to cut back. FTEs. Actually, in the last couple of years, we've actually dropped by 11 positions. We've rehired 4 of them. But of that, 7 open positions that we continue on. We have the AMI metering that we've put into place. That AMI metering means we don't have to send someone out to do their turn on, turn off. The metering is more accurate. That has been a savings to all of the citizens and all of the people we serve. In some cases, we're enrolling in long-term maintenance agreements, such as Marco and some of those that make sense. On the other hand, we've also taken in third-party services we've reduced. We've moved them in-house. Also in the IT, in HVAC, we're not going out. In fleet maintenance, we're doing much of that ourselves. We're taking and doing that in-house, and we're not charging more for it. We're actually saving money because we're reducing the amount of third-party expenses. In-house server, Matthew has done a great job just recently with that in-house hosting, savings about $12,000 a year. Equipment replacement, what we're doing is we're pushing and tightening up on all of that, and we're making sure that it's lasting. We're taking and running it to end of life so that we're not replacing it too soon. If there's another 10% or 15% that we can get out of that piece of equipment, we're doing just exactly that. Paul, and now we won't take all credit for it, but our investment management, Paul has been very, very meticulous with it. Yes, this has to do with changing economy and bonds, but it also has to do with every single day taking care of what's going on. We've gone from 1.1% to 3.16% on all of our reserve. Again, asset replacement, others, depreciation schedules have been lengthened, vehicles lasting longer, pumps, PCs, etc. On our training, we have employees that must maintain licenses. We cannot run water plants, wastewater plants. We have to have certain accreditations in many of our positions. And with that, that training's essential. If we looked at the expenses for 2015 to 2019 for our training, that was about $182,000 a year. Since 2021 to present, we're at $66,000 per year. That's a pretty significant reduction. Tree trimming. We set out a while ago to make sure that our system was completely cleared. This year, we've been able to back off. We have dropped an entire crew from tree trimming. We'll still keep the other two going, but we are saving $200,000 in tree trimming this year. Reduction in overtime. We have been proactive in our efforts. One of them is that with our videoing and point repair for sewer, the number of overtime call-outs, when I first got here, we were at about 3 to 4 a month. Overtime calls because of overflows. We are now down to less than 1 a month. Water loss, we've worked very diligently at driving that number down. And with that also, we were very aggressive at hitting all leaks, even small leaks. And with that, we've seen a reduction in overtime. Back to the tree trimming. Not only have we saved that crew from this year for $200,000, we've seen a reduction in the cost of our storm repair and storm responses. In 2021, our storm response, emergency response cost was $275,000. The next year, 2022, it dropped to $217,000. In 2023, so far, we have spent $0, and this year, $0. On that emergency response. Now, again, it is a factor of how severe the storms have been, but I would submit that we've had some pretty good ones come through, some straight wind events, and because of our tree trimming, we've been able to keep the lights on. So those are actually things that we've done to be efficient and to cut back and to reduce the costs and to control costs. There's also some expenses that are flat out beyond our control. Chemicals at the wastewater treatment plant, 71% increase in just 4 years. At the water treatment plant, 115% increase in 5 years. That's pretty significant, and we do not see it going down. Materials, including transformers, probably one of the best examples. We're averaging about 200% increase. While we have some of our 50 kV transformers are almost 5 to 6 times. And they're staying up. It's not coming down. One of the things that the government has decided is that they want to have efficient transformers. They're looking at saving about 2% or less by doing a new type of transformer, and they're going to force everybody to do it, which would cost us an entire change out of every transformer in our system. If that happens, it will be absolutely crushing. We have insurance, health insurance going up. Property insurance has gone up 50% in just 5 years. The other thing that we have to look at is supply chain issues is the timing. We still have to deal with transformers that aren't delivered for 12 to 18 months, especially the larger ones. So we've got to make sure that we're continuing on the path of replacement at the Indian Mound substation, etc. And our vehicles, some of the larger ones, it's going to take us 2 to 3 years to get them built and delivered. So those are still things that we don't have any control of, that we have to plan for. We are calling on the community. Erica is doing a great job as we have times when there are peaks coming. We warn people of it. We invite people to turn down their thermostat a couple of degrees, maybe in the the wintertime, up a couple of degrees in the summertime. Anything we can do, we're trying to get that out the best we can. Now, here's your good question, Daryl. What's in the future? A 2023 MISO survey suggests that the region's limit of committed resources will decline going forward, with a potential shortfall of 2.1 gigawatts occurring as soon as 2025 and growing larger over time, the report says. This is the mix that we talked about. The dates are 2005, long time ago, 2020, just 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and what they anticipate in the future. There's two squares there, well, a couple that I would have you pay attention to. The first one is the big black one, 76%, that's coal. We do have the Prairie State coal. We anticipate that it is absolutely under fire. I'll show you just how. We anticipate that that coal will be going away in the future. By 2030, it'll be diminished from 7 to 3% is what they're anticipating. The amount of natural gas will go from 34 currently, roughly, to between 45 and 55% of the mix. That's still going to be the major source. You have to have at least 50% of your source has to be a reliable source that you can call on in the middle of the night when the sun's not shining. The other one to look at is the green. We can see that in 2020, 13% of our load comes from renewables, but they're not reliable. And we're looking at between 20 and 34% of our fuel mix becoming renewables. And they say as this renewable increases, their accreditation will also decrease. This up here, if you can't see it, sorry, in the back, this is 18%. So wind and solar are what you might call 18% reliable. As we add more and more into that mix, they're telling us that they're going to lower that accreditation. So it's going to go even lower from 18 to 16 to whatever it might be. But they're going to drop it more and more as more and more renewable hits the market, therefore driving up the need to have a spinning reserve somewhere, a spinning turbine that can be called on when the sun isn't shining. This, if you look at the date, that's kind of an interesting date. August 12th, 2024. That was a week ago. Illinois power plant must face Sierra Club air pollution lawsuit. This is Prairie State. What happened is that they have been operating under a permit, and until the next permit is given, they operate under that permit. Well, they're saying that this permit has run out. This is something that's common, and yet they now have a judge in Illinois that says, yes, this is actionable, and that the lawsuit can go forward. So it's going to be under attack, and we'll see how well Prairie State, which we are we own it through MPUA, who owns a portion of it. This is a very important asset for us. Grain belt. We have a contract for 15 megawatts of grain belt. As soon as they can get it to us, it's a very favorable price for electricity. It doesn't bring us much of anything so far as capacity, but we're looking forward to it. But this is one of those things that constrains the ability to get capacity, is that they're trying to build the power line. Well, this is where, again, the date, August 9th, 10 days ago, where a court in Illinois have pulled the permit for grain belt going across the state of Illinois. They've revoked the certificate. The argument is that they've made is that even though they've got the right-of-ways and could begin construction of the line, they don't believe they have the money to build it. And that seems like an odd argument, but that's what they've got going. Remember I said PJM. PJM stands for Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland. This is our co-RTO to the east of us. They too have gone from, again, end of July, $2.2 billion was their cost per capacity, has now gone to $14.7 billion in capacity. They are looking at many places in Maryland having up to a 24% increase in their rates. We have a question before MISO where we're saying we sit here on the border, on the Mississippi River right here, and we get a lot of our power through Illinois zone. We're in zone 5, they're in zone 4. And we're saying, will you consider taking and removing this constraint? Because we have contracts, we have transmission lines that we have under contract that allows us to take power from zone 4. Why is that a constraint for us? And so that is another question that we're having taken up in an appropriate way. We hope that they can take a look at that. In the past, they've considered combining zone 4 and zone 5 because we actually physically play well together, but that's an argument for MISO. This is an interesting chart. This is the years, and here is the rate of increase that the BPW has installed. This is inflation. And so even though everybody, all we do is we just raise rates. Well, we did it once in 2015, and it was a 5% increase. Did it again in 2017, but it was actually a 0.62% decrease. Last year, we did our 9.5% increase. We hadn't had one in over an increase in over, from 15 to 23. And then this year, because of capacity, not because of our management of the system, we have to propose this 16% increase. That puts us in total at 29.8 versus 30.55% increase in inflation since 2014. So here's what our proposal is. In 2025 to 26, what we were doing is we were seeking for both immediate and long-term capacity in Zone 5. We've had a little bit of success in this already, but we don't have any guarantees. And so we're remiss to make any commitments at this time. Second, if we get it secured, if we are able to get that capacity in Zone 5 and at a lower price, we will lower rates accordingly. If you want to take a picture of that, go right ahead. And then finally, we are looking seriously at becoming self-reliant in generation. And we have a high-level study underway currently to see about something out at the industrial park. That is all I have. Any questions?
I have a couple, Darren.
Okay.
We talk about the 1.25% bond to get us back in compliance. Mm-hmm. Is that 15% of that 16% total on that purchase power? 100% of that? Will it take 100% of that to get us back to that 1.25%?
I believe so, yes. So what we're looking at, again, it's a revenue to debt ratio. So it takes a look at what we have for revenues coming in. It takes the expenses, and that's that ratio. Yes, that's what we need. So if we were to pay for it, we have some reserves. We are below our reserve policy currently. So pulling from there is not a revenue. And so it's got to be revenue versus the debt. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that we need to get back in compliance with our bond commitments, number one.
Yes.
For ourselves first and for the city as a whole, because that affects the taxpayers on anything the city does, anything the Board of Public Works does, anything like that. 16% is a lot. That's a big rate increase. I just want to be guaranteed that it takes that full 16% to get us in compliance, because if it does not, and we're planning ahead into 2025 and 2026, and we could get by the remainder of this year with, let's say, an 8% rate increase, wait till we get this study back, reevaluate in the spring when they do the next seasonal auction on purchase power price, and then adjust the rates higher accordingly instead of a big 16% right up front.
And currently, so what's going to happen is October 1, we're nailed in. So it's going to happen. What we're going to wait, you're absolutely right. I agree with you. Let's wait for the UFS. We're going to get that study back. And if we're at 15.45, we're going to go to 15.45. We're going to keep it just as tight as we can.
Daryl wasn't here during the budgeting process, but we also, if you recall, if the rest of the board will recall, we put in mechanisms to look at that coverage ratio. I think we put in 4 times throughout the year. We'd done one, the big one, after the auction. The second one was after summer, after we get through some of the higher pricing that we see in the summer. And then the third would be after winter. And each time checking in to see where we're at, taking a really close look at that coverage ratio, making sure we're hitting that covenant, and then adjusting accordingly. And UFS will kind of do the same thing for us as well, just like you're saying.
Thanks.
All right, that seems enlightening, and seems like you folks have done everything to do whatever to show what's going on. Anyway, anything additional from the general manager's report?
No.
The next item, I don't really know exactly what that's about. Mayor's report, rate discussion. We'll move on to operations report then.
Don't know.
That one's later.
Good afternoon. You'll see here in the electric portion of our report here, we did decrease our number of outages by 12 this past month to 17. Overall, our reliability index had jumped to 99.993, which is a substantial increase over the past month. That's mainly due to some outages that rolled off from June of 2023, and also our low amount of outages this month. If you'll recall, last month we had a high number of outages that were caused by birds and squirrels. We did take action on that like we have with the trees in the past. We have a crew going around and installing animal guards. Over the month of July, they were able to install 60 of those animal guards, and hopefully we'll continue to see the number of outages attributed to animals go down. Overall, our water production number is higher than it was for the previous 2 years. We are still searching for our water loss. We're working with a consultant to try to do some monitoring within the system. We had a contractor in town that did leak detection. We didn't find one big leak he didn't find one big leak that would be causing all of the water loss that we have according to our numbers. And so we're continuing to work with our other contractor to try to pinpoint where that loss is coming from. If you'll recall, it's been about a year and a half ago, we started at the water plant and we installed some metering that found out that our metering leaving the plant was inaccurate. And so we've recently installed new meters up there. We did the double check on that, and everything's within plus or minus 1%. So we think we're good there, and so we're working further out into the system. One thing to bring to your attention, we got the next GAC change out on the 5th and 6th of September. Again, with the scheduling, we're doing that about every quarter and having to plan pretty far in ahead and not wait in order to get trucking. Overall, on the water system side, we had a relatively quiet month as it relates to water main breaks. We did fix a few under the superintendent's direction. They went and retired a 2-inch main up on Booker Street. At some point in the past, there was a new 6-inch main installed on the other side of the street. They just never tied all the services over. And so once that 2-inch developed a leak, rather than dig it up and replace that section, they just tied the old services over and retired the old main. They also went ahead and started exercising valves. That is something we would like to do on a more frequent basis than we are doing. That way, if we do have a leak, we're able to isolate the minimum number of customers as possible. It also helps us identify valves that are either at their end of life and we need to get replaced, or valves that are nearing the end. They're hard to operate. We can make those notes, and next year when we go do the exercising, we can see if it's gotten any worse, and maybe it moves up to the replacement schedule. Wastewater plant, you see our number going through the plant is higher than it was in June. Again, that's mainly attributed to the high river level. As we get the higher river levels, we're higher groundwater tables, old services in the South Main area that are allowing water to come in that we don't necessarily need to treat. And so later we can talk about how we're addressing that. We did have a O2 skid blower that went down a month or two ago. We were able to get a temporary in here, a rental unit, until the new blowers show up. They're 36 to 40 week lead time once we place that order. So we're able to get this temporary unit in here and use it rather than utilizing liquid oxygen, which it costs about $35,000 a month. So, as Darren alluded to, we had one SSO for the month, and then the sewer crew mainly spent the month prepping to do the lining work in the downtown area outside the flood wall. NISC related, we're continuing to work with them to come up with an outage management program for us to use. IT was also busy. We had the CrowdStrike issue that impacted a lot of people, and more recently we had an issue with Teams that they spent a lot of time on trying to get the computers up and back into operation. So we appreciate their effort. And then we've got just the monthly business office stats. Unless anybody has any questions, I'll go ahead and do the project report.
Any questions so far? No. Go ahead, please. Thank you.
All right. On water treatment plant projects, we've got the gravity filter media replacement. That's where we're redoing the 4 gravity filters with sand and anthracite, replacing the under drains. We started that back about the end of April. Filter 1 went online shortly before the 1st of July. Right after the 4th, they took filter 2 down. The plan is to have it back in service next week, and then we'll take filter 3 out of service following the Labor Day weekend. We ran into some issues. The plans we had were from 1924. When they removed the material, it wasn't exactly as the plans had shown, and so they did a lot of learning with the first filter, but it's translated into the more efficient use of time with filter 2 anyway. Hopefully filter 3 is the same. You never know with that old construction.
Probably
And
completely
again, what's that?
It'll probably be completely different.
It might be. It's on the other side of the building, so these people over here don't know what these people over here were doing. So, water loss, again, we're working with Eden Brothers. Again, that's monitoring, trying to reduce that water loss. As far as sewer projects go, again, we're spending about $500,000 lining areas of the sewer system, the sanitary sewer system that are located outside the flood wall between wastewater plant down along Bear Creek and then South Main areas. Currently, they're in the 3rd week of that. They started, I think, the 5th of August. Yeah. And it'll take approximately 5 weeks to get that completed. So far, they've not hit any snags, so we're doing good with that project. Hopefully, we'll see next time when we have a high river event that we don't see the increased flows like we have in the past, because even in this instance, we're lining through manholes that we don't. I mean, there's no services on most of these mains. And so we're able to line end to end. And if they can go through a manhole and go on down, that's one last access point for groundwater to enter the system. In the future, the plan is we'll go in, cut that out of the manhole, and then we'll do rehabilitation work on the manhole where they'll actually spray a sealant or a liner on the interior of that will help prevent groundwater from entering as well. Again, there will be a phase 2 of this project that's everything above a 15-inch diameter main, but it probably won't happen for maybe a year or so as we build back up our reserves in the sewer side of things. Another project on the sewer side is the Clarifier 3 rehabilitation, and we had those people in. First part of June, they did some sandblasting and painting of the metal components. They ran into some rain issues and us having to put that clarifier back into service right there toward the 1st of July. And so they didn't do quite as good of work as we had anticipated. And so they're back in town, re-blasting that and getting a good coating on it. The second phase of this project is actually lining the concrete wall of the clarifier, where the cement portion has been deteriorated at a point where the aggregate is exposed. And so they hopefully will be able to get in there mid-September and get that completed. North Street Storm Sewer, we're finishing up plans on phase 2 of that project. And then phase 1 will begin after the Labor Day. Bear Creek Dam Spillway, we were working with MDNR and the Corps of Engineers to get all the approvals on that project before it goes out to bid, hopefully sometime in September. They're finalizing the geotech work and making contact with the landowners and make sure we don't miss any of their concerns, because 100% of that project is occurring on easement. And so there's going to be a lot. I think we got around 50,000 cubic yards of dirt to move. And so we want to make sure we address any of their concerns before we go out to bid. And then Indian Mound substation replacement on the electrical side. We've bought the transformer. It's scheduled to be completed in October. Due to various other components not showing up in time and us not getting the plans complete, we're going to work with a contractor to store that until maybe next March. The last phase we got to go out to bid on is the dirt work portion. And we're going to go out, I think Thursday is the day that's set to go out to bid. And we'll have that bids received by the end of September and bring to you all for approval in October. And then the tie line project, we're just waiting on notification on the grant application. So that's all I've got, unless y'all have any questions.
Anybody have questions?
Yeah, I have a quick one. The Bear Creek Dam, what's the time frame on that once you get approval and everything from ODNR? Or is that a fall project or a spring project? Are you going to start right away, or do you know?
It depends on, it's a pasture right now. I was talking with the owner today. He'd like to have it done during the winter months. It depends on weather. So we've got until July of 26 to get it completed. We just have to have it bid by the end of this year and awarded. So,
Okay, thanks.
yep.
All right, anybody, additional questions for Matt? No? Haven't heard none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if we could move on to the financial report with Paul.
All right, so kicking off a new fiscal year in July, fiscal year 2025. So we will briefly look at the financials here for July. On the balance sheet first, some highlights to point out. Unrestricted cash did increase just slightly from the month before. The summer months do provide us slightly higher revenues with the hotter weather. We did have a decrease in long-term debt. We had another debt service payment that we made in July on one of our water bonds. Other than that, didn't really have any other significant changes. Utility-wide, total assets are up slightly from last month and are down by about 2% from a year ago. On the income statement, utility-wide net income did come in right at budget for the first month of the new fiscal year. Drilling specifically into the electric fund, we did see higher revenues than budgeted. We did have a little bit hotter July than normal. Purchase power did come in about $61,000 more than budgeted for the month. In the water fund, revenues also came in higher than budgeted, but operating expenses were a little bit less in that fund. For the sewer fund, we continue to fight issues at our wastewater plant with our compressors. So we've been buying more liquid oxygen than we would normally need to. As I mentioned last month, we have purchased new compressors that are projected, I think, to be here later this year. In the meantime, we have rented a generator to help out with that process so that we're not having to buy so much of that liquid oxygen. But that did hurt the sewer fund again this month. Compared to last year, utility-wide net income was better this year by about $59,000. The electric fund did perform a bit worse with the higher purchase power costs in that fund. The water fund did better, and the sewer fund did slightly worse. And to start off the fiscal year, kilowatt hour sales in electric were about 5.7% more than a year ago. But when you look at the 5-year average, we're still trending down, and we were about 0.7% less than that average. Keep in mind that the highlights that we talked about during our budget process earlier this year, those obviously have now kicked in now that we've started a new fiscal year. The big one being capacity. Keep in mind that the summer actually cleared relatively low, and so we won't start to recognize those much higher capacity costs until the fall, which that begins September 1st. Scroll down and look with me on page 18. We've got our dashboard there. We look at this every month like we do, or we'll continue to look at this every month like we have been. The debt service coverage ratio right about the middle of the page. So to start the fiscal year, the electric fund's at a 1.5. Obviously, that's a good sign. We'd like that trend to continue and at least stay above that 1.25 for sure. But all three funds right now are above that requirement. Another thing I'd like to point out, we did ask our customer service supervisor, Emily, to her and her team to make an effort to push customers more toward paperless. Obviously, with the cost of postage going up, it's now 69 cents, I believe, a stamp. With having about 8,800 customers, our postage costs are anywhere from $4,000 to $5,000 a month to send those out. And so the more people that we can push to paperless saves us a bit on those costs. Since we've asked her team to do that, they've made an effort to communicate that to customers coming in the office, phone calls that call in. I've heard them just making that a priority. You can see there that our paperless customers from last month to this month did increase by over 1,100. So hats off to them on that effort, and we will hopefully see that number continue to go up each month. Our audit is scheduled for 2 weeks from tomorrow, the week of Labor Day, and so we are working to close the books from last fiscal year to prepare for that. Wanted to say thank you to everybody that's helped out so far, and we hope to get that done here in a couple weeks. Like every year, they won't have that report done, completely buttoned up for us until November, but we are hoping for that. The UFS cost of service study that Darren alluded to is well underway. We've given them about 90% of the information they've requested, and we do still hope to have a report. It might not be a full report, but something preliminary by next board meeting to present to you all at some level. I think that's it. Any questions on the financial report?
Yes, I have a question.
Yep.
The debt service coverage ratio that you mentioned earlier on page 18, if anybody's following along, on the electric there, I'm new, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it shows 1.53. So that is above the 1.25 bond covenant that we've been discussing, right?
Yep.
And so this is through July of 2024, correct?
Yep, correct, yeah.
So when we talk about this purchase power pricing, again, you guys are going to have to walk me through it because I'm new here. So training wheels, okay. That $719 they alluded to in Darren's presentation was for the spring and fall.
Correct.
So we've already seen those prices in the spring already? We have not.
No, yeah. they're
Matt shaking his
for-
head. No, I don't know. I'm asking.
Yeah, the fall coming up and the spring coming up in 2025.
Okay, so that wasn't that in the spring of 2024.
Correct.
Those are,
Yeah, those are the
numbers
capacity
indicated.
prices for the next planning year. Yeah, so we've,
and based on that, you're projecting that we'll fall below that 1.25, even though we're currently above that.
so if we were to keep rates where they were today and not make any rate increase, then yes, we would fall well below once that capacity cost kicked in. September 1st will be the fall price, and then we'll have a bit of a reprieve in the winter when that price it was 75 cents, and then we'll pay the higher price again in the spring. So if we weren't to do anything with rates, then we would see this debt service coverage ratio come June at about negative 2.5 if everything shakes out the way we had budgeted. When the rate increase kicks in October, that will give us revenues that offset that increase in capacity cost.
Do you know how much in general that 16% increase on the electric side, how much revenue total revenue that'll generate?
$3.6 million.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, if you'll
3.6.
recall, the increase in capacity from what we had budgeted was, we budgeted right at about $1 million. Now we're going to have to pay about the $4.9 million in capacity, which is about $3.9 million. And the rate increase, like I said, is going to offset about $3.7 million of that budgeted.
Okay.
So the charges start in September and the revenue starts in October.
Yeah, so the rate increase that we're proposing would start October 1st. We pay capacity charges year round, but if you remember that higher cost of new entry cost was for the fall and the spring. So September, October, November, we'll pay that $719.81 cost, and then March, April, May will be the next spring higher cost.
I have a couple more quick questions for
Yeah,
you.
no problem.
One, and again, I apologize as I'm trying to educate myself here. You talked earlier about a project somewhere in the neighborhood of $3.2 million, I think, that we used reserve funds for to pay for in your report earlier. Do you remember?
The first time we got hit with capacity charges, it went from, we had a $235 capacity charge per season, and that was for every single across the board. And yeah, it was gonna hit us for about 3.4, and we determined to take that from reserve.
From that, okay. All right. That's what I was confused about. So, because we're sitting here again at the same crossroads,
Only higher.
3.6, you know.
And so I think what Paul's describing is that we're gonna pay the summer capacity, and then here comes the fall capacity, and then here comes the winter capacity, and then here comes the spring, and we're equalizing it. We need to have those differences, a total of about 3.6 million. And that's what this rate increase to the 16% is gonna cover that. But in the wintertime, or in the summertime, we're gonna make money, but we're gonna spend it all come. And so we're chasing this curve, but we're gonna give you 1 year's worth of rate change that's gonna take care of the highs and lows and maintain that ratio. Does that make sense?
It does. I understand and I appreciate the complexity of that. The 16% does not sit good with me. And as you have the off season in between, what's legally, what is our ability to raise or lower rates? Is that bound by charter at a certain time? Can we do that as we deem necessary?
As long as we're going to give the proper notice, have the proper public hearing, and we agree that it's within our duty to the citizens.
Because I just feel like, coming from my perspective, like, let's look at maybe half of that to cover the first wave, as you mentioned. Step back, take a look at the economy. We have a presidential election this year. Take a look at everything else, and then come back if we need to in 6 months and raises the other 8%. To me, as a taxpayer, that looks a little bit better, that we're really trying to dig in, do our due diligence, and save what we can where we can. And I understand that, we can cut the rates back if it's more favorable and stuff like that. I'm not saying that you're lying to us by any means, but I know anytime I've ever lost something, I worked for the city for 10 years as a firefighter, had union contracts, things like that, working for the railroad. Anytime you lose something, you're not going to get it back. And I know that we did adjust the rates a little bit, in 2015, I think it was. But overall, I don't know.
So I can see your point is that beginning in summertime, we're only paying $30. But come that fall, are we ready to, if our predictions are accurate, we're not going to able to do just a 16%. Let's say we pulled it back, we're going to have to make up that difference. We're not only going to do 16%, we're going to do, call it 20% to make up that difference. And so we're looking at that 1 year. 16 is horrible. 16 is terrible. But that consistency for at least that 1 year, is that better than having a bigger hit in the middle of it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And the last thing I have, and then we can move on. I don't want to hijack everybody's time. And it's just a general statement, and I don't expect Paul or anybody to really answer. But Matt mentioned it in his report, talking about the sewer funds, and alluded to waiting until we get some of our reserves built back up in the sewer funds. Not just the sewer funds, all of the funds. What is our plan to build our reserves back up? So again, I don't want a detailed answer now, but those are things that I want you guys to think about and either bring back to the board or let us know, what are some ideas moving forward or things that we can help with to try to do that.
Excellent.
I'm done. Thank you.
Yep, good questions. And we do go through the budgeting workshop process, which, like I mentioned, obviously you weren't here at that time, where we look at some of those timelines, timeframes of when we're going to do rate increases. And so we'll appreciate your additional insight again when we come to do that budget workshop again.
All right. Anybody have any questions for Paul? And moving right along to unfinished business, we're looking at reauthorizing the line of credit.
All right, bit of a housekeeping item. We do this every year. We had a consulting firm back in 2017 that took a look at the business park for us and looked at the requirements that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers had laid out to do some mitigation to replace lost stream bank area. And so what we would do is, or what they would have us do, is build a lake out there. We have not begun any of that work to this point. If we were to move forward with that work of creating a lake and some of these other mitigation requirements that the Corps of Engineers laid out, and for whatever reason we weren't to finish them, the Corps requires you to have a line of credit on hand with a bank for somebody to come in and finish that work, just to make sure it gets done. And so what this is a annual reauthorization of that line of credit that F&M Bank does for us on an annual basis every year. So we're just asking the board to go ahead and reauthorize that line of credit. It's about $61,000. Again, we have not started any of that work. That you only pay interest on that if you utilize it, which at this point we have not, nor do we have plans to in the near future.
I'll make a motion to allow the chairman to sign the reauthorization of the line of credit with F&M Bank.
Have a second?
Yep, I'll second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
I apologize. I did not print off a hard copy, but I'll get you to sign that after the meeting, John.
Okay.
Thank you.
And schedule rate and fees, I guess that's just to formalize the,
Yeah, I do my very best to give you guys 30 days to look over a document before we authorize it. And so this is that document that we'll be looking at next month. Like Ethan mentioned, we will do a public rate hearing. And so really, I guess what we need to do is have the board approve having that rate hearing ahead of our meeting in September. That would give the public the opportunity to come and voice any opinion they had, and then we would move forward with adopting the new schedule of rates and fees at the normally scheduled board meeting in September. But this just gives you 30 days to look it over and ask any questions that you might have yourselves, or you can ask any questions tonight. But obviously, we've got in there the 15.8% rate increase in electric, the new rates that lays out, the 3% rate increase in water, and then we've got 4 other kind of smaller changes, increasing our maximum penalty for late payment from $20 to $50, adding a service charge for what we call door tags or notification for extreme weather conditions, increasing the customer requested service call outside regular hours from $80 to $100, and then laying out our meter tampering charges in the schedule of rates and fees. We've always had those outlined in a policy, but they were never actually included in our schedule of rates and fees, so this puts them out there. So no action being requested on the schedule of rates and fees. The only action requested is to go ahead and set the date for that rate hearing as of, is that September 16th? Yeah, September 16th is our next board meeting.
So I guess to comply with that requirement, I need a motion.
Yeah, I'll make a motion. Or,
I have a question.
Sure.
What is the requirement? How far in advance of the vote do we have to have the rate hearing,
No
the public hearing, before we take a vote?
less than 30 days and no greater than 15 days.
Okay, so the issue that I have is I assume that we're going to schedule it before our next board meeting, so that would be before 4 o'clock, so sometime in the afternoon, or?
The way we've done it historically is at 4,
Okay.
and then do the board meeting right after.
So I am concerned that people that work an 8 to 5 job that would want to come voice their concern may have a challenge coming to that. Also, I would like some time personally, whether it's a day or a couple days or a week or whatever, to listen to the feedback from the citizens on this rate increase. Take that feedback, learn from, or whatever you want to say, and then make an informed decision on that. I'd like to have some time. I don't want to have a public hearing and then be asked to vote on 12 people's opinions an hour later, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
I mean, if we have a public hearing and people show up, right, and they ask questions like we're doing tonight, and they ask Paul questions and Darren questions and things like that, and we don't have an answer, or we learn something new, or, the neighbor down the street says, hey, can I talk to you after the meeting? I really want to express some concerns or whatever to you. That gives us a few days to take that information in before we're asked to vote on this.
we can always schedule a special meeting the week later.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't
Or have
matter to me.
that rate hearing like a week before.
Right. Like in the evening,
Yeah.
5:30, 6 o'clock. I mean, I don't think it's going to take too long. But that way we're doing our due diligence and letting people have an opportunity to come speak. You're going to do like the Monday before or something at 6 o'clock. I mean, I don't know what your schedule is, but I can be flexible. Darren, I don't know what you and your staff's
September
schedule
9th,
is.
6 o'clock.
I think it's a good idea. Early.
Yeah, it's fine. I wouldn't argue with that at all.
Paul,
So the
would
9th?
Would you be available on the 9th at 6 p.m.? Is there a council? It's a Monday night, right? Yes.
We're going to have a KC meeting, but.
What time is that at, John?
No, it's unimportant.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I would.
What time are you talking about, 5:30?
Whatever you want, 5:30, 6 o'clock. Just sometime after 5 where people, if they do want to have a chance to come speak.
5:30 works for me.
I think it's a good idea.
5:30 on the 9th?
Yeah.
I'm good with that. Darren, does that work for you?
Fine, works for me.
Everybody else good? I make a motion to set the public hearing to discuss rate increases for September 9th, 2024 at 5:30 p.m. here at the Board of Public Works office.
In a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Okay, I think that's all I needed. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
All right, thank you. And the next up is Matt has a proposal to turn surplus of older F-150.
Yes, sir. I just, as required, before we dispose of anything, we got to bring it to you all to get surplus. We recently received a new truck that we had ordered earlier this spring. And so now I'm just here to ask that you surplus this 2006 F-150 with 185,000 miles on it. And we'll-
Using your standard method, is there an approved method to get rid of stuff like that?
Typically, we've used Purple Wave. They charge the buyer the commission charges with it. It has a broad audience, so most of our trucks don't stay locally. It goes. We had some trucks before that went to Florida, they seem to bring the best dollar. So
I think the city's had luck using them as well. Is that correct, Melissa?
if you're interested in it, it's sitting out here in our parking lot. Don't get too close; you might need a tetanus shot.
I guess need a motion.
Yeah, I'll make a
Do
motion.
that.
Oh, second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hey,
Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. All right, do we have any comments from the city attorney?
I have nothing.
Any general discussion before we go into closed session? Daryl, do you have a list of people to be admitted, or do you remember? Sometimes,
Yeah, I think she does.
sometimes it'll be,
It's not there
oh,
right now.
okay.
Yeah.
It'll be board members,
Yep.
and then Darren, Matt, myself, and Darren, who else?
Did you have?
The the city attorney, our attorney, Lisa. I think that's it.
Okay, so we need a motion for that.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we're in closed session. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me use the restroom real quick.